Welcome back, folks, to another episode of what I think I'd like to call weak signals. And, the purpose of a weak signal, or the idea of a weak signal, is that it can give you foreknowledge of what is likely to happen in the future before it happens. So, I think that that's really what we're talking about here. That's what we're trying to get into. So I think I like that term. Before we get into the news, I'll just briefly cover the markets. Packet is at almost exactly 0.2 of a cent. It's basically defied our trend lines entirely, hasn't really gone up, nor has it really gone down. You can see for a moment it was on the upward trend, and then it just switched and decided it didn't want to do that either. So it's basically going sideways at this point. The euro is $1.01. It's just weakness in the Eurozone, obviously. Gold is also just acting weak, but not in any kind of collapse position. It's just a very, very strong dollar at the end of the day. Bitcoin is showing strength, and it has dropped down into the 20,000 zone, but then recovered back into the 21,000. This is a very strong market, as I've said before. The Federal Reserve for the past 2 Wednesdays has reported a slight gain of their balance sheet, but I want to caution you that the balance sheet shown here doesn't also include swap lines, which is how the Federal Reserve effectively lends money to other countries. So swap lines are believed to be around 4 trillion worth. So just so you understand that this is the classical balance sheet, not including these other assets. Then oil, Brent, is at almost exactly $100. It's just been hovering around there for the past few days. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the news. China, there is some pretty bad things are happening in China. The banks are collapsing. There's 4 banks which are effectively collapsed. I mean, it depends on how you define collapsed. They have frozen the assets of their customers and basically recategorized them as investments. So, somebody deposits money in the bank says, that's mine now, and you're an investor, congratulations, which is obviously pretty much theft, is what it is. It's what happened to some of these crypto companies that were doing lending in crypto. People put their money in them thinking that it was like a bank, and then the crypto company turned around and said, no, you're an unsecured lender. This is something that is coming out of the fact that these banks are way overextended and very much dependent on a weak housing market that is what's going on in China. So I want to just go through a few little items here. These are the 4 banks that have no liquidity, they have no cash, they're just not giving people their money when they ask for it. There have been some protests outside banks. I'll just run through this. People are demanding their money, standing outside the bank in crowds. This is the kind of thing that you see when there is a bank collapse. Also, this is quite relevant. The assets of the Chinese banks represents 350% of Chinese GDP. So GDP is the amount of everything that is bought and sold in 1 year. So it's just a rough measurement of the size of the economy. And the bank balance sheet is how much loans are outstanding. So the Chinese banking system is further overextended based on the size of the Chinese economy compared to that of the US. So anybody who's more overextended than Wall Street is probably in a lot of trouble. Sri Lanka. So I tweeted this earlier, but what we're seeing here is in Sri Lanka, people are having to scan a QR code in order to buy fuel because the amount of fuel is just, there isn't any. They aren't able to secure deliveries of fuel anymore, and so they are having to effectively ration it. I talked about this in a previous video. I'll put a card up here about the CBDC future and how that can turn into rationing. And what we're seeing is rationing in Sri Lanka. And by the way, these, let's say, comic book villains, the World Economic Forum, are involved in setting up that system. Also, there's just riots in Sri Lanka, and this person is indicating that they think it's likely to come to Europe. I think that every place is different, but this is just an idea of what's going on in emerging markets right now, thanks to this kind of global economic slump, if you might call it that. Burning down the homes of 38 politicians. That's just another the thing that, that's what happens when things get rough. They will eventually turn on the leaders. So I think these politicians probably would wish now that they didn't attend the World Economic Forum event. And so, this is where I'm saying that the WEF is probably more of a liability for people who attend than it is an asset, because whatever they're talking about there, it's kind of just lumping them in with a lot of bad ideas and bad policies that come from other people that attend the WEF. So what do we have? Panama. So Panama is also breaking out in widespread protests, and it's about the same thing. It's fuel, inflation, food costs. These kinds of things are what destabilize government. To come to Europe for a minute, Germany has been historically the main economic engine of Europe. It is a major export economy. They make a lot of things and they export them. And what we're seeing is that is slowing down as the importers no longer want to import. And there was a lot of imports from the U.S., and the U.S. is not really importing right now, not to the extent they used to be. And there was a lot of import from Russia, and Russia was buying especially machine tools, things that could be used for building their military capacity from Germany. And that is one of the reasons why Germany has been in such an unsure position regarding where they want to be with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So gas supplies to Europe have restarted. The Nord Stream pipeline, the undersea pipeline from Russia to Germany, which that pipeline was shut down for a couple weeks in the past this month. And it was a planned shutdown. It was for maintenance, but there was concern at that time that maybe they would just never turn it back on. However, they have, and it is running at 40%, but you should understand that it was running at 40% before the shutdown as well. So it's running at 40% capacity, but this is believed to be insufficient to ward off an energy crisis this winter in Europe. Now, Mario Draghi, the now ex-Prime Minister of Italy, he was in this silly picture. He was formerly the head of the European Central. He is obviously a Euro-friendly politician, and he was the Prime Minister of Italy until he was basically forced to resign, and now he is no longer Prime Minister, and Italy no longer has a government. Something that Americans may not know is that the way that these parliamentary governments work is that they organize a consensus among the Congress. They organize, they need to get together a consensus group who then nominates a prime minister, or the prime minister is elected, but they need the consensus of a certain amount of the parliament in order to organize a government. And with one resignation, the government can be effectively without a government for some period of time until a new consensus emerges. So Italy is in effect without a government right now, and this is going to probably inure to the benefit the Lega Nord, the pro-Italy, anti-Europe, anti-global, anti-immigration political party, and it will probably inure to the benefit of Russia, because Italy will no longer be on side with the European Union. You can see here kind of a comment to that effect, and this is also very telling that the day after the government collapses in Italy, government collapses is a strong word. The consensus that made the government able to operate collapses. Gazprom, Russian gas company, has announced a 71% increase in gas deliveries to Italy. So you can see that Russia is not so much trying to starve Europe as it is to divide Europe and to play the different parts against each other and give to those who are less on side with the liberal internationalist Western policies. Since we're talking about Mario Draghi and the ECB, the European Central Bank, is now going to launch a new program of bond purchases. This is more quantitative easing, whether they call it that or not. They are trying to soak up government debt from countries like Italy in order to make sure that these countries are still able to operate. Who's going to fund this? How is the euro not going to become worthless? The answer here is probably that it will basically be coming from the Federal Reserve in the form of swap lines. The US dollar will be defending the euro, and Americans will be paying this price in more economic slump in the US, because they're basically carrying these ally countries like Europe. Another thing is the ongoing attack on the food supply and the ongoing attack on the government, on the global food supply. So you can see here that, a lot of people probably know about the farmers' protest in Holland that was triggered by the government, just absolutely insane policy, saying that they wouldn't be allowed to use fertilizer, or no, they actually, because they didn't like fertilizer, they went directly after the farms and said that they had to stop farming, and they were trying to basically kick the peasants off their land. And that has sparked some immense amount of protest in Holland, which is still going on today. Now, the UK has a similar idea, it seems, but they're offering farmers £100,000 to exit the farming business and just stop doing it forever. It's a one-time payment in order to stop farming. So there seems to be a common interest among some of these liberal internationalist Western governments to make food more scarce. And that's something I just want to pay attention to. So the Holland, the farming protest in Holland has continued. More people are getting involved, more regular citizens. It's more than just farmers, which is a good thing, because no farms, no food, and these kind of policies of kicking people off their land, that this just can never end well. And in another kind of piece of disturbing news, everybody's favorite dictator, the president of Canada, has decided that he wants to go the way of Holland and also force farmers to cut their use of fertilizer. This kind of nitrous oxide concept. And this is what's strange about this is, what they're arguing is that it's something about protecting the government, but protecting the environment. But you think about it for a moment, why is it 2022 when suddenly there's a nitrogen crisis? Not to be confused with the climate change crisis. It's a nitrogen crisis, and all of these countries really need people to stop farming right now. So, I think that, if you take it at face value, it doesn't stand up to even the slightest bit of scrutiny. But it's very difficult to try to understand why these governments are basically trying to attack the global food supply. So, we have this kicking off in Canada, and that is going to probably, I'm thinking about why this is, and one of the reasons why, which is possible, is that what governments are trying to do. So to give a little perspective, this is not going to end particularly well for the politicians who propose it. People like Rutte in Holland and Trudeau are very probably going to be persona non grata in the political space in the next 10 years or so. Now, the reason why they're doing it, there has to be some reason by somebody who doesn't need to face another election. And one possibility here, and again, remember that when there isn't enough food, what ends up happening starts to look a lot like Sri Lanka, a lot like Panama, and nobody wants to be burned out of their house because their country descended into chaos over their own policies. But so the why is very, very perplexing here. And one reason why it might be is that the Western countries they have an idea that they're going to put pressure on the global South to basically keep the global South subjugated by cutting off their supply of food, because a lot of the food importers are global South countries who they are kind of used as a piggy bank by the Western democracies, so-called democracies. Whenever there is an economic slowdown, they kind of use the global South as a piggy bank. One thing that you need to remember is that rich people and rich countries are astonishingly good at converting their problems into the problems of poor people and poor countries. So that's a possible explanation, but this is something that I don't claim to know. Now, In the US, in a little bit of news from the US, there has been an ongoing spat between the White House and some of the Republican border states, where the White House, obviously, they don't like each other. The White House is wanting to throw shade on these states, and they're doing it by making absolutely no effort to secure the border. So you just have random criminals and so on just pouring across the border. Obviously, some people who are trying to start a new life for themselves, but also a lot of people with nefarious intentions. And whether they have nefarious intentions or not, you just have thousands and thousands of people pouring into these tiny towns and just soaking up all the available services, and just massive homeless problems and so on. So in a kind of an escalation or a response to this attack, the border states are beginning to bus these people, these migrants. So I want to understand that these migrants they're technically allowed to be in the U.S. because they have applied for like refugee status or something like that, and so they're allowed to be there while their file is being reviewed. So they're not technically supposed to be thrown out. So since they're legal in the US, what these states are doing is now busing them to places like Washington, D.C. and New York City, which is probably better for the migrants because they will get access to more services in these cities than they will in these small towns and red states. But it is causing an overload of in these places in D.C. and New York, where they just don't have the homeless shelters are overflowing. There's people living on the streets, and they are kind of starting to get a taste of their own medicine in some way. So I think that this is probably going to force some change of policy on the border, and we'll see that coming up. Another thing is this January 6th hearing, which, there was two kind of things that happened which really caused it to fail, and it has really failed. I think they wish that they hadn't done it at all at this point. The one thing that I kind of expected, which was, you had these people like Hutchinson, and they would come up with these really silly ideas. Like everybody heard the meme about Donald Trump jumping into the front seat of the limo and going through bulletproof glass to grab the steering wheel. It's kind of stuff that was then discredited moments after being said, but it just had the effect of discrediting the entire commission. Now, that was to be expected because they weren't really covering, they didn't do the thing that judges are trained to do for years and years, which is to really prevent people from saying crazy things, to make sure that the what's said is very reasonable. Even if, in court, even if the person is completely guilty, they go through this long dance of presuming innocence at every step of the process. Even if they kind of know that they're guilty, they presume this innocence in order that the process has an air of great legitimacy, that you can see that at every stage they gave them every opportunity. And in this case, I don't think that they really knew what they were doing, and they started to allow people like Hutchinson to get up on the stand. And these people, they have their own political agenda. What they want is they want the book deal. They want to go on TV. They want to promote themselves, and they will do so by saying the craziest thing that's been said. And they'll say it, and then that will get them political points with a certain subgroup of the population. But it erodes the legitimacy of the hearing as a whole. So the thing I didn't expect them to do, which this really caught me off guard, was to basically admit or clear Donald Trump of any wrongdoing. So you can see, and I took a screenshot of this tweet, and it's basically Biden or his tweet author writing that basically at the end of the day, the thing that they're accusing Trump of is lacking the courage to act. And if that's really what their charge is at the end of the day, then they've really lost. Think about the fact that they could have latched on to some unfalsifiable conspiracy theory that when they nodded or they said some word and that word meant something, and they could have really just focused on that, even if it's wrong. Obviously, it's politics. People will people. But then they would have had kind of an alternative narrative that, oh yeah, there was some real wrongdoing, but we can't prove it in court. But instead, they went this direction of basically clearing Donald Trump of any actual wrongdoing. And so this whole J6 commission has really just been an advertisement for Trump, free advertising for Trump. And they are representing themselves as kind of the party that goes after their that they use the FBI and they use these kind of things for political purposes. If you disagree with them politically, then you might end up in jail kind of party. So I mean, I think that this has really hurt them, and it's really promoted Donald Trump in a way that they didn't have to do. They could have said, we're never going to say the T word again, and then Trump would have to buy his own advertising. But instead, they really promoted his name by trying to, by doing him a big trial, even if it's sort of not a real court case. And then, what it comes out to is it's not guilty, and so they did all this work in order to just clear him of any wrongdoing. That's something that I really didn't expect, and it just shows a startling level of incompetence. And you can see here, this is a CNN. A majority of Americans now believe that Trump was either not or only partially responsible for the rioters. So I mean, and it's up from 47% in 2021. So this is the kind of thing where they basically cleared him of wrongdoing. People are beginning to believe that, and so now he has an open runway to run for president again. And according to a Rasmussen poll, both DeSantis and Trump are very strong candidates, but Trump is further ahead by far. There, you have 59% think Trump is likely to win, whereas only 23% think it's DeSantis. And what I like about Rasmussen polls is that they go after likely voters, because there's a lot of people who they get angry, they get upset, but they don't vote, and they just on polling day they don't have the pattern of behavior to go and vote. And so when you poll these people, you will find out a lot of things that don't actually matter for the election. And when you're polling, likely voters, these are people who voted in at least three of the last four elections. You're getting people who are probably going to go to vote. So, I mean, I think that if Donald Trump runs, he's probably going to take the primary. And let's face it, the Democrats don't really have anybody strong to run against him. And this is their own fault, because they didn't allow new blood into their party. It was very protected, very much, you can't be a new person growing up in the Democratic Party and kind of overthrowing the old guard, which the Republican Party has been overthrown twice in the past 10 years. It's been overthrown by the so-called Tea Party in around 2012, and then it's been overthrown by the Make America Great Again Party in 2016. So there's this constant revolution or inside of the Republican Party, which is bringing to light powerful individuals, whereas in the Democratic Party, it's just very stagnant. And so now they're going to pay the price of that, because they don't have anybody who's really strong that they can put up against Donald Trump. Now, this is just completely silly. The White House has decided that, so America's in a recession now. There's been 2 quarters with negative growth, and so that's the technical definition of a recession. And the White House has decided that not only is there a recession, but they are going to make sure everybody knows it by trying to redefine the definition of recession. So instead of this being maybe a week of news that maybe I would cover on this channel, instead, it's going to be a month of news and people making memes about the definition of recession. They didn't need to do this. And every other country, there's a lot of countries in recession right now, UK, Europe, Japan, but they just said, okay, it's a recession, and they move on. In the US, they want to say it's not a recession because there's reasons. And, you've even got this guy, spokesman for the economic presidency, and he's going as economic advisor. Okay, so he's going up and standing on the podium and saying, well, it's not really a recession because this is more complicated than that, and there's lots of jobs. Now, what's important to understand about those jobs is that actually those aren't real either. The actual job numbers is down by about 300,000. It's up by 700,000 only because the U.S. government has added like 900,000 a million. So these jobs are make work. They're hiring people to sit at desks, and they're printing money to do it, which is just going to make inflation worse, which is going to force the hand of the Fed, which is going to make the recession longer. So there's actually no good news here, except that this government is trying to basically I don't know what they're trying to do. But if they're trying to rub in the fact with the American people that there's a recession, then job well done. Congratulations, guys. I don't know if they're trying to somehow cover it up, then they've done about the worst that they possibly can. And the last news item is that there have been multiple so-called highly credible FBI whistleblowers have come forward to Senate Republican Chuck Grassley, and they're alleging that there was wrongdoing inside the FBI in order to basically cover up cover up potential crime by the president's son, Hunter Biden. So I think that, if you follow Hunter Biden at all, then you kind of know that obviously something had to have been covered up. But the question is, why are they now coming out? And I think that that is kind of an evidence of rats leaving the sinking ship. So, what they talked about in this article is that this so-called cover-ups, these alleged cover-ups have gone on through two presidencies. So through the entirety of the Trump presidency and all the way back to the Obama presidency, these things have been going on. And so just now they're starting to blow the whistle. And I think that what's happening is that people in government are trying to save their own skin from what is probably going to be a mass firing once the next president, probably Trump, takes office in 2025. So they're starting to jump ship from their posts in the party, seeing that there isn't really much future in continuing to toe the party line. Yeah, so I hope you liked the video. I hope you liked this format. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. It really helps. Subscribe if you'd like to see more stuff like this, and comment down below on what you think is the reason why these governments are attacking the global food supply. Why are they doing it? What do you think is likely to happen next? And whatever happens, we'll be here to talk about it. And until then, stay awesome.